I'll start. Let's see if I can go all the way. Let me tell you a true story you won't believe. Flying over here Saturday morning from Albany Airport, I got in line at the security division of the airport at 5:20, half awake, and after throwing my luggage up on the conveyor belt to go through X-ray, this little female Transportation Security Administration officer came right up in my face and said, "Sit," and I said, "Excuse me?" And she said, "Zip." And I said, I don't know what you're saying to me." And she said, "Zip up your fly." I don't know what that has to do with air transportation. I guess it means you can't fly with your fly open. That's what you call impromptu supervisory consultation. There's a great deal of unrest in CPSP at present. And I don't like guns, and I don't like violence, and I don't like abuse, physical or verbal. But as Ralph Waldo Emerson said in 1861, I do love the smell of gunpowder. Because when people feel strongly about anything, strong enough to fight for something, it means they care. Even if it's just about themselves, sometimes. That's a start. Too many people in the world don't care about anything. If more people cared, we'd have 5,000 people here instead of 200. We have a lot of people in CPSP who care about something, and some of them may be misguided. Maybe I'm misguided. And we're going to have some heated exchanges in this meeting for sure, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's going to get hurt if I have any say in the matter. We will all keep our hearts and minds on the covenant. The covenant trumps every rule and every standard, and we will struggle over matters that we disagree on. But we will continue to love and care for each other, and we will do just fine. What other group do you belong to where you can put in writing that the leadership is corrupt and irresponsible and live to tell about it? Can you do that on your job? Can you do that at church? Can you do that at the garden club? Well, you do it at CPSP, and you've lived. Some of you. Let's keep it that way. Some of you are concerned about the future of CPSP. I'm not. But I am concerned about the larger clinical training movement, and that's what I want to make some comments about this morning. I want to make that the burden of my comments, that the picture that I have of the movement as a whole is a picture that I see with growing alarm. You can decide whether my perceptions are accurate or not, or whether they may be just the views of an aging male whose dreams have not materialized, or materialized only in the most fragmentary ways. 89 years ago, this coming summer, Anton Boysen ran his first clinical training unit. He didn't call it CPE, clinical training. He enlisted 4 trainees, 3 men and 1 woman, Helen Flanders Dunbar. And these summer interns signed on not as chaplains, but as orderlies. One of them didn't last long. A patient locked him in one of the closets, and it wasn't discovered till much later. And when somebody released him, he fled from the institution, never came back. So he ended up with 3 trainees. In any case, these interns in this first unit of clinical training worked as orderlies in the daytime, making beds, delivering towels, sometimes emptying bedpans, and conversing, and most importantly, conversing with patients. Particularly, they conversed with patients that had religious ideation problems. They focused on them, but they didn't function as chaplains. Their assignment from Boysen was to understand the dynamics of the troubled mind and try to understand how they might be of therapeutic help to them. And Boysen organized this program because he had just a couple of years previously come out of psychiatric lockup himself. And in that period, almost 2 years of lockup, no one would listen to him. The psychiatrist wanted to give him advice for 10 minutes and leave him alone. No one wanted to listen to him. No one wanted to listen to Boysen talk about his story and why he thought he was crazy, why he knew he was crazy, and what happened to him in his childhood that led to his insanity. So he decided to create a training program where he would train ministers to do what he didn't get himself in his treatment. Now, much of what I observe today in the clinical pastoral movement at large, including CPSP, but especially beyond the boundaries of CPSP, is a gross betrayal of Boysen's vision. Instead of ministers dressed like orderlies, we have become purveyors of religion and religious ideology. We have become spiritual head trippers. We have become advocates of spirituality, peddlers of religion, low-paid evangelists, hoping to entice people to become more spiritual, whatever that means. This is Boysen turned upside down. A part of the eclipsing of Boysen's vision was an accident. A part of it was the shift from training programs being almost exclusively in psychiatric settings to the current position where training programs are almost always in general hospitals. So it's much easier just to not listen, go and visit a patient and chit-chat and say a prayer and leave. It's much easier to get by. But if you're working in a psychiatric setting, the patients are not going to allow you to come in and mumble a prayer and leave. They're going to talk straight and talk dirty and be rude, and you have to deal with them differently. So it was a bad move for the clinical training movement to shift from all psychiatric to almost all general hospitals. It set it oriented us in the wrong direction. And the second thing that led to our present state of affairs is the fact that Richard Cabot has been victorious over Boysen. Richard Cabot, who started out with Boysen, the pair together created clinical training first. But Cabot's vision was that the minister didn't do any counseling. He would go and visit and say prayers and be the assistant to the physician who was the real healer. So that kind of diminished status and gutting of the job description of a chaplain, according to Boysen, has shaped the clinical training movement as a whole today. And that's the crisis we are in my opinion. One of you was telling me just a couple of weeks ago that you have a trainee, and they showed me the case where the trainee went to visit a 16-year-old hospital patient, and she wasn't in the room very long before she asked the patient whether he had an active spiritual life. And this 16-year-old boy said in response, do you mean do I talk to spirits? The chaplain got what she deserved. The currency of the language is debased. No one really knows what we're talking about when we mouth on about spiritual life. If I were directing a chaplain's department today, I would prohibit any staff person from uttering the word spiritual. But that's why I'm currently unemployed. We're being misled by the pundits in our field. 2 years ago, a book came out called Paging God, Religion in the Halls of Medicine. The metaphor of paging God is obscure. I could not figure out whether the author meant that the medical staff pages God and they get us, or whether they page us and we bring God, or what. The metaphor is troublesome. And the author certainly does not understand the Boysen tradition. If you work in a medical setting currently and you bought this book or thinking of buying it, I have some advice that you didn't ask for, but I have some advice. Wrap the book in brown paper, or else keep it in your desk. Because if any medical clinician sees a book called Paging God and thinks that's what you do, you'll be ruined. You won't be taken seriously in the hospital anymore, in my opinion. Whoever God is, and there are many different theologies, he is certainly no cosmic bellhop. And he doesn't answer pages. It reminds me of Paul Schurer, the late, great Lutheran preacher in New York City who I had the joy of knowing for a brief time, once said in a very authoritative voice, God answers every single prayer. And the answer is always no. Of course, we know that everyone cries out in prayer in desperation. I mean, if I were falling from 25,000 feet out of an airplane, I'd be the loudest prayer of all, but I don't think it would keep me from hitting the ground. The author of Paging God is quite affirming of American religion and of the current chaplaincy, but it's not the chaplaincy that we inherited from Boysen. For example, the book notes approvingly of a Unitarian chaplain who carries around with him a pocket full of rosaries in case he runs into a Catholic patient. Now, no mention was made of any extra pockets for Muslims, Buddhists, Eastern Orthodox, Protestants, or even our largest clientele, agnostics. So any chaplain who's carrying around gifts for just one religion is going to get a bad reputation. You don't need clinical training to learn how to distribute religious artifacts, or even to say prayers. And by handing out religious artifacts, one shows one, or being too quick to bring up spirituality, for example, as I mentioned with this 17-year-old boy, 16-year-old boy. If you hand out religious artifacts or too quick to bring up religious ideology, you're already tilting the pastoral relationship toward, don't tell me your doubts or your fears or your disbeliefs or your agnosticism, because no one's going to talk to you about their inner negative feelings if you're already pasted on religious piety in the relationship. It's deadly. Purveyors of spirituality are not going to hear the sordid stories that everyone wants and needs to tell you as a clinical chaplain. The axiom is, we approach patients without memory or desire. If we bring our own agenda to the pastoral relationship, it is contaminated from the get-go. When Boysen was in lockup, his best friend brought him some reading material. And the reading material was Freud's introductory lectures. I don't advise you to do that to any psychiatric patient that you know. But Boysen devoured the book, and he said, and he wrote, that Freud was exactly right, that the talking cure was what he needed and what all psychiatric patients needed, someone to listen to them talk and try to make connections and understand their insanity. The talking cure is the heart, the nature of our work, if we are competent clinicians. But today, the talking cure has been turned on its head in most chaplaincy programs and physicians that I see. The talking cure has been turned on its head. Now, in most cases, the chaplain talks and the patient listens. A major blow to the Boysen vision occurred 15 years ago when the principal leaders of the clinical training movement, excluding CPSP, by the way, we weren't invited, approached the Joint Commission on Accreditation of Healthcare Organizations, JACO as we call it, requesting JACO to delete the words pastoral counseling in the description of the chaplain's role in hospitals and replace it with spiritual care. That was a catastrophic request, and the Joint Commission followed and did as they were asked. Our profession gave away the powerful concept of pastoral, shepherding, like a person caring for sheep, a metaphor rooted deeply in every culture on the face of the earth, farming, nurturing, taking care of animals, the herd, connoting nurture, vigilance, protection. We gave away that powerful concept of pastoral and replaced it with spiritual, which fuzzily connotes something up there, out there, or God knows where. Second, we gave away counseling and replaced it with care. Not a bad word, but certainly much less weighty than counseling. And if ministers can't do counseling, who is going to do counseling in this culture? The wholesale abandonment of the powerful description of our roles as pastoral counselors has been catastrophic. It has been a blow from which I'm not sure we will recover. Well, let me sum up in brief this end of my peroration. I've talked enough. The wider clinical pastoral community of which we are a part is no longer serious about the vision of Anton Boysen, the vision that he dedicated his life to. It has traded in Boysen for the popular, lightweight, comfort food of spirituality, passed on from chaplain to patient. I fantasize that a suitable inscription to chisel on the tombstone of the clinical pastoral movement might be, Here lay those who first sat at the feet of Anton Boysen, but who later resorted to paging God. But we in CPSP must keep the Boysen flame burning. As good pastoral clinicians, we can do this. We can listen rather than talk. We can make connections where we see connections, which means talking little. We can descend into the messiness of human relationships and leave the gods and their spirituality to take care of themselves, something which they're quite capable of doing. We in the CPSP, our business as pastoral clinicians is to examine how we blindly reenact the abuses we receive from our parents and authorities, and how hard it is to remember also that they loved us and offered us good things even in their fragmentariness and brokenness, as Pat Conroy likes to write about in his Broken Family. Our business as pastoral clinicians is to parse how we hurt and destroy each other and hurt and destroy ourselves even. Our business is to parse how we sometimes love each other and sometimes hate each other and often don't even know the difference. Our business is to explore, as we listen to ourselves and to others, the depths of our negative feelings, our envy, and our resentment. Our business as pastoral clinicians is to observe how we screw each other in both senses of that word, and to explore how it is and how it came to be that often the most difficult person to love is ourselves. Our business as pastoral clinicians is to refuse to make everything either right or wrong, good or bad, friend or foe. Our task is to understand that everything and everybody is a mixed bag, a complex amalgam of good and evil. We're all that kind of complex mix of good and evil. This is our arena. This is the arena Boysen lived and worked in and dedicated his life to. This is what Myron Madden taught us to do. This is our arena. Let's go and be who we're supposed to be. Thank you very much.